request Mr. Aakrit Vaish, our moderator, Mr. Sriram Raghavan, and Mr. Sandeep Murthy to please come on stage. Today we will be discussing the business impact of artificial intelligence, along with how investors look at this sector. It is truly a privilege to have a distinguished panel here today. Our moderator for this session is Mr. Aakrit Vaish. He is the co-founder and CEO of one of the world's largest chatbot platforms and one of the early pioneers in AI. In India, Haptik counts some of India's largest brands as partners and is also one of the highest rated mobile applications in the country. On our panel, we have Mr. Sriram Raghavan, Vice President, IBM Research India and Singapore, and CTO, IBM India. He is responsible for representing and communicating IBM's overall technical vision and strategy with key stakeholders across the India-South Asia ecosystem. He also serves as the worldwide blockchain leader for IBM Research, working closely with IBM's industry platforms and global services businesses to take innovative blockchain solutions to clients across the globe. We also have Mr. Sandeep Murthy. As an early investor in InMobi, InfoEdge and ShopClues, three of India's billion-dollar technology companies, Sandeep Murthy is one of the builders of India's internet economy. He is a co-founder and partner at Lightbox, a Mumbai-based venture capital firm investing in Indian consumer technology companies. He was also the CEO of ClearTrip in 2006 for 3 years. Now, kindly note that we shall have time for Q&A towards the end of the session, and I shall now hand the mic over to Mr. Aakrit Vaish to take the session forward. Thank you.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Alright. Great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Siddharth, for organizing this. This is great. Where else we get to talk about AI with small group of people, wine, whiskey. So I think that's awesome. Thanks for setting it up. On the note of wine and whiskey, I hope everybody has drinks. Mine's about to get over, so you to whoever the bar is. But we try and make it fairly interactive. It's a Tuesday evening, so middle of the week. So we want to try and have some fun. I'm personally very excited about this session, or rather this discussion. Got a couple of really interesting people on the panel. They have very interesting viewpoints on what AI is. I'm sure everybody's been wondering what AI is, thinking about it, trying to implement it. I try and do the same. We're going to pretend that we know something, right? And try and see if we can get everybody else to also learn a little bit. So, like I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So let's try and we'll do the 15 minutes. But of course, if anybody has a burning question that cannot hold till the end, please raise your hand, and then we'll try and take it. On that note, we get started very quickly introducing myself. My name is Aakrit. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Haptik. We're a 4.5-year-old company based in Mumbai, 130 people. We started working on chatbots a long time back, and now they've become cool. So now we are in business. Up until that point, it was just survival. Now we're very excited about what the future has to hold. Sandeep?
Sure. As Siddharth mentioned, I run a venture fund in Bombay. I've been investing in India since 2005. I've been investing since 2005. Started largely with consumer tech as our premise, and continue to do that. But what's evolved over time is our definition of what is the space that we're investing. We also invest in real world businesses. So we have a company called Fasos that makes food. We have a company called Falenco that makes furniture. So we're finding the implications of tech across sectors as well. So imagine some people here run real world companies, and it'd be interesting to hear your takes on how technology is affecting it. But I think we're pretty clear that it's going to affect everything.
What do you mean? I don't run a real world company? Like, that's just like in some artificial world?
The day your block comes to life and has something.
Great. The day there's a robot roaming around over here serving us alcohol. Yeah. That'll be a good move. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Pleasure to be here. So as I think I was introduced, I'm responsible for IBM's research lab here and in Singapore, and I also have a global role in maybe the next cool technology associated with after AI, which is blockchain. And maybe we can talk about the intersection of the two over dinner. But in some way, shape and form, even though it wasn't called that, I've been doing artificial intelligence for a couple of decades now. Starting from, I guess, my PhD work and then subsequently research. And I think one of the things that's been fascinating is some of these inflection points that we are seeing now. I don't think when I was doing what was artificial intelligence, there would ever have been a gathering of top leaders over an evening to understand artificial intelligence. So we've hit some sort of an inflection point in the 4 or 5 years, and I'll share some thoughts on why I think we've hit that inflection point.
No, that's awesome. So we got somebody who knows something on the panel, hopefully. So whenever we're lost, we'll probably go to him and ask questions. And then, so yeah, we got obviously somebody who's been in the space, we got an investor, and we got a startup, right? So it's like the perfect setting for hopefully a blockbuster session. So the first question that I ask myself fairly often, and let's maybe start with Sriram, because he'll probably be able to give us explain to me like a 5-year-old what is AI?
A great question. I think there's 3 things that I think are characteristic of whatever you associate as an AI system. I think one is previously, and I'll start with the first one. First one is making sense of information when it is not explicitly designed for a machine to understand. So making sense of information that's primarily designed for human consumption and getting a machine to still make sense. Until AI, we had to feed data into a machine the way the machine could make sense. We started from punch cards, and then we had to put stuff into tables, and we spent a lot of time organizing data for the machine to make sense. So I think one of the first characteristics of an AI system is you do what you do. You speak, you type, you take photos, you do your business processes, and the system says you don't have to change anything. You do what you do. I'll still make sense of the information even though I'm not. So I think that's one characteristic of an AI system that lets you make sense of it. I think the second is take all that ability to understand these different types of information and then assist you in making decisions. Built into that is some form of prediction, because every time you make a decision, you predict. You predict that it's going to rain tomorrow, you take an umbrella. You predict that the stock is going to rise, you invest, right? So I think prediction and therefore decision making is the second characteristic of an AI system. And the third one, which unfortunately sometimes overshadows the other two and sort of biases everybody's understanding of an AI, is interaction. So systems that are natural in the way they interact, chatbots being one, voice systems being the other. And unfortunately, I think Hollywood has sort of emphasized the third angle. So everybody, when they think AI, think aliens coming in and doing strange things. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's just one of the 3 elements, and a lot of business value will come from even the first 2 elements. So to keep it short, understanding of information the way humans communicate without having to engineer it for machine consumption. Number 2 is decision making. Assistance in decision making and built in with prediction. And the third is a natural way of interacting as opposed to you having to interact the way the machine does.
So, there will be a lot of dumb questions over here today, and I'll start the ball rolling from my side. So let's say I feed data into some kind of program to design it to make some predictions. Is that AI?
At some level, yes. But if you ask why this excitement now, have we been doing AI in some form? Possibly. But I think why this excitement is, in some of the tasks that have been always viewed as, there is no machine is going to do, there is only humans. We are starting, or we have hit human level accuracy in the last, depending on which task is in the last 5 years. Think about the task of image classification. We are all used to, and I'm giving consumer examples for the underlying technology. We're all used to Facebook magically recognizing all our friends in social media. You upload 1,000
Facebook can do a lot these days.
It's doing a lot these days, and we won't even get there, or maybe we will get there.
Yeah.
But the point is, until some number of years ago, the ability of a machine to recognize and identify people and humans, it was academics still trying to. We suddenly hit an inflection point due to a few technologies, we can get into what they are, where we got to hit human level performance and even improve. In the official image challenge now, the machines are better. first the machines matched human in classifying up to 1,000 categories, taking an image and putting it into one of 1,000 buckets. As soon as you turn the 1,000 to 22,000 buckets, the machines can do better than you. You get all. Same with speech. Same with, so pretty much every basic document recognition does. In the last 5 years, they hit an inflection. So that's why we are revisiting this, but you're absolutely right. At its most level, feeding data into a machine and the machine making a decision or a prediction is AI. So in some respects, many of you are already using AI, but you're probably not using the full power of all the data that's available to you. And I think that's the promise of AI. That hopefully will.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So we're all actually AI companies. That's great news. So tomorrow morning we can all go back and tell our teams that we do some level of AI. No, I think that my 5-year-old self would definitely understand parts of it. Sandeep, we were talking earlier in the week before to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about here and outside as well. You had a very interesting perspective on how you think of AI, particularly as kind of a macro, horizontal stakeholder in the broader ecosystem.
Look, I mean, ultimately, it's like I would say 5 maybe years ago, people say I'm investing in a mobile company. And it doesn't really mean much today. Today, everything's mobile. If your business is not considering the mobile implication of it, it's probably a challenge. I think the same way, AI is one of those foundational technologies. It's just residing everywhere. And it used to be relational databases were to some extent that. Today, when you think about how decisions are being made, we were just talking earlier about my business, which is venture, where you would say that it's extremely subjective. I'm searching for ways now to take the subjectivity elements, keep them aside, and try to understand what are the quantifiable elements and leverage a machine to actually help me understand the different parameters, to understand risk differently. That's AI. I'd imagine any business that has some amount of data is going to be using it in some way. So therefore, when people ask us, do you invest in AI companies? We say, no, we invest in companies. If AI is a part of the solution, then so be it, and that's great. But it's funny you were mentioning blockchain earlier as well. I've often heard the statement that said, blockchain is the answer, now what's the question? And so, I mean, I'm finding that AI is becoming this thing where it's like, do you have AI? And this was, in the late 90s, it was, if you put a .com at the end of your name, your valuation went up. Or you put an E at the front, or an I nowadays. And so the same way, if you put a .ai at the end, it seems like dynamically, magically figure something out. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, honest truth, we did that. We used to be haptic.com and we moved to happy.ai.
Changed everything.
Did not actually. I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, we hoped it would. But yeah, but I see your point. I mean, we did it with the whole purpose of, the perception that we are an AI first company. But that's at least my view as well. Like exactly what you mentioned, right? I couldn't echo kind of at least Sandeep's view, because as just been in the space when we've seen it, it's like asking do you invest in internet, right? Like you said, that everybody has to have an internet presence and digital presence. I think that's the same way that sort of AI functions, right? Like
I think a better question to ask is, are you using all of your data? Is a better question to ask, because often that maybe you're not, and then you could ask, is AI relevant? Maybe you're doing basic data analysis, you're using basic data, but there's piles of data that you're not leveraging. And then maybe the question is, are we using all of the data? Could you use it? If so, there are a set of technologies that have matured in the last decade or so that you might want to consider to then enhance.
I would say, could you use it? What would the effect be, right? Is it going to make your product cheaper? Is it going to make it better? Is it going to deliver it faster? I mean, is anything going to change? And I'm like being an investor in the consumer tech space in India, I've seen tons of people go down a path of burning lots of money in the name of it's a technology-based solution. And I mean, I think that technology does play a role in many areas, and I think here especially, there's a lot that it can do, but I think there's also a question of, is it relevant, is it on the cost curve that it works?
distribution and all that. Right?
I think integrating AI into business processes is very, very much the case. But I believe strongly, this is just me personally, that it will happen. It will happen, but there is still a journey to be made. Because I think where we are at is, for lack of a better word, we are at what I would call narrow AI, in the sense that if the task is sufficiently well defined, and you have the data to train an AI system, and if you understand that the AI system is going to deliver some business value, chances are you have the technology. And I would argue as a technologist, given enough data and well-defined tasks, compute power or technology or math behind it is doable. I think the bigger question to ask is, how many such narrow tasks for the data you have that you're able to do? I think the cusp we are going to see is when AI systems start to become better at what I would call broad AI, which is what we as human beings do. And examples of broad AI is being able to learn with smart aspects. You're not going to get a billion images for every task. You're not going to get a billion users. You're not going to get 5 million hours of audio required. Because not every enterprise is one of the consumer companies. Can you still do AI? Yes, you can. Innovation is happening, and I think that's good. So, learning with small data in the world of big data is actually, in my mind, going to be an interesting point. The second is AI systems getting better at transferring knowledge. Today, and I'll give an example that I'm personally familiar with, building AI systems is like starting from scratch every time. So, I teach an AI system to recognize, a particular type of cancer in a radiological image. Training it for the next cancer type is pretty much the same amount of work, which is where the cost curve starts to matter because, I have to spend another $5 million, okay, is it worth it? I think AI systems are going to get better at sort of transferring that learning. So you have put an investment in training them on one piece of data for your organization. They are going to get better at taking that learning and doing the next step. Because as human beings, we do that. Just because I learned to recognize a table, you don't have to spend, I don't forget about how to recognize a table when I learn how to recognize a chat. Today, AI systems are very much like that. That's what I said, narrow. As they start to broaden, I think that is an interesting.
It's so true that we experience, at least in our business day to day, right? You build one bot and you train it to do X number of things, and then when you want to build a second one, it starts again. And I'm like the non-technology person, the CEO in the company, running around asking my CTO, why? Like, why do you have to kind of repeat it, right? It's just, for all at least, business people will be like, why do you want to repeat a task? It's just technology should just work. Yeah, but
But it's happening. We are at that cusp between narrow and broad, and I think when we hit that, I think the promise is going to be even bigger.
Yeah, exactly to that cue, as a next step, I want to get into, maybe get the guys' thoughts a little bit on specific applications that they've seen in AI, and especially Sandeep's experience at ClearTrip and some of the companies, and obviously Sriram's experience. But before that, I want to get a quick poll on just sectors and industries, so that maybe we can share some specific applications from those industries itself. So I'm just going to quote out some different industries, and if you can just raise your hands, if you're from the industry. So automotive, it's one. Okay, healthcare. Oh, very healthcare heavy. Great. Okay. BFSI, banking, financial services. Telco. E-commerce. There's only two of us.
It's the first room I've been in.
What else? Where I missed out? Any other industry? Manufacturing.
Human resource.
Oh, good one. HR.
Education.
Excellent. Education. Any others?
Military applications.
Military applications. Love to talk to you later. Okay, so we maybe.
I think another one which is unusual, insurance.
It's not unusual.
No, it's not an industry.
Okay, great. So we have, I think, some great examples of great sort of verticals. So maybe Sandeep will start with. I'm familiar with obviously two directly with sort of education, and then some of the stuff you do at ClearTrip. Maybe those examples or any others, and also do touch upon what you were showing us right now, right before this, about your new investing model, which so that you can spend more time in South Bombay bars.
So, we were actually looking at education for a long time, and I would say, when you think about, as a venture investor, one of the hopes I would have is that our premise is to invest in areas of high risk, where return can hopefully be impactful, both financially as well as to the people around. And so you look at big problems. And clearly education, healthcare are massive problems as you look around here in India. And so our feeling was that we want to invest in areas where technology can make a difference and it can be a lever in the business model equation. Now, we looked at lots of models around technology, around education, in education, we'd seen a company in Korea that had done something called, it was called Mega Study. And what they had done was basically they've recorded teachers and had put those recordings of teachers online. And they turned these teachers into rock stars. And so the opening pitch at a baseball game in Korea was thrown by the math teacher, who is apparently a rock star. And so this is basically a content creation game. And content is not very well respected, and IP is not very well respected, and in a world where it's pervasive and you can get it, we just felt like that's not the right space. Eventually, we ended up investing in a company where the premise was content is not going to rule it, but the platform had to rule it. And we had to actually deliver results. So you had to improve scores. And the place where that mattered the most was in high-stakes entrance exams. So IIT entrance exams became a really good test case for us. And so we invested in a company called Imbibe, which is now expanded beyond the IIT test prep, but started with that. They would say that they're education, AI for education. And the premise was, if we could understand user behavior, and I think we were talking earlier about data sets and understanding user behavior. If you're in a situation where you have lots of data and you can understand user behavior, can you apply a process to actually help kids improve? So how you navigate an exam makes a big difference. Which questions you answer, when you answer them, what underlying content you don't know. So interestingly, there's no knowledge graph that existed before we started doing this that said concepts that you learn in kindergarten relate straight up to the concepts that you learn in 12th grade. They're all linked. So therefore, if you're getting a question wrong on a physics exam, perhaps it has to do with the fact that you didn't understand physics. It's not that you didn't understand physics, you didn't understand the concept of velocity. And that impacts your understanding of force. And it impacts your understanding of acceleration, mass, all of this. And so therefore, let's give you more concepts there. Now, to create the question papers, you have to have a system that could intelligently ingest content. So we did it initially by hard brute force. You put the questions, tag it, get people to sit there and do it. Eventually, we were able to do character recognition to get the basic information. Then you were able to start to take that and say, map it against the knowledge tree to understand what concepts it relates to and auto-tag it, which gave us the ability to auto-generate question papers, which you could take across multiple formats. So no longer you're limited to physics, chemistry, and math. You can now go into biology, all sorts of other areas. And so this is how the systems worked. And now we've now expanded that and tested it with the bases of students, and where we can deliver within 10 tests a 60% improvement in your score from a reference point. And so that's, to me, impactful. That's a platform delivering it, and that's where we're starting to see AI both on content ingestion, which has been very valuable to improve the speed at which you can actually get the system up and running, to actually delivering results for students based on understanding where they're actually failing or challenged.
That's incredible. So 60% from, let's say, a reference point compared to what a standardized, otherwise
what
paper
their, what their first test was.
The first test.
Your first test, and then from there how we improve it, just based on
a little bit more about the data entry. So you mentioned some character recognition and stuff, because let's say I can imagine, sure, that sounds great, but then how do you translate so many question papers into like actual machine recognizable data?
So it starts basically with that. You just scan it in, you recognize the stuff that's there, the information that's there. You now are able to understand that this is a physics exam, this is a question related to this. You tag it, and that now, basically what you're doing is you're taking unstructured data and structuring it. And once you've structured it, you can then take it and put it into different areas. And actually the bigger implication of this is you can now translate this. And I think in a country like India especially, taking this out of English and moving it into multiple languages becomes extremely powerful. And I think it's really important here, because in other countries, this stuff is optional. You have public school systems, you have things that work for it. Today, you have 20 million odd kids born every year. Your model of one teacher to 40 kids is not going to work. So therefore, you have to find solutions where you're saying, look, I can deliver education that can be quantifiable, can be measured, and do that across languages in a scalable way. I think is massively impactful and important. And along with that, we'll evolve business models that will hopefully work.
But the one point that the reason I wanted to ask that follow-up question was that, and Sriram, maybe you can attest to this, is that what I keep telling a lot of our clients also would meet, and maybe people over here, that a lot of just the initial development of the data model is brute force. It is just like scanning papers, punching in cards, and even we have, let's say, actual, so what we've done is we've upskilled a lot of our operations staff to actually become what we call AI trainers. Right? They take a bunch of data and they're literally brute forcing, typing it in and putting it in. And at least at our company, we find that to be a fair bit of challenge, which we're scaling and we're doing better. But just quickly thought that maybe for us, machine learning algorithms and a bunch of technology like you mentioned still give the answers. It's that brute force effort initially which takes a lot of time.
It's a great question because one of the things we regularly encounter is everybody asks, okay, what should I do in my AI journey? Right? And it's a common question. And I think the first thing is really get a handle on your data strategy. And I think the mistake would be to try and take a AI use case or an AI pilot or whatever you want your first step and judge it on its own individual ROI. If you are a big company, can afford not to do that, I would say don't do that, because what you're going to do is, as part of the first step, you're going to start to get a sense of addressing some of these data. So your first investment may be much bigger for maybe little benefit, but you have done a lot of that ugly data prep work that then you can drive many use cases. And then at that point you're primarily applying the next technique, next use case. It's not as simple as I make it out to be, but I do think that trying to judge every use case on its own, red, black, or here's my input, here's my output, is it possible, would be a mistake if you're in it for the long journey, because what you will amortize is a lot of this data organization prep work. And the tool sets to do that are still extremely limited. You are absolutely right. We are in the very early stages of tools. One of the themes that's happening is AI being used here itself, which is, for example, today it takes 100 people to do whatever it takes you to do to get a data set for AI. Okay, if I have only 10 people, can I use AI to amplify the work of the 10 so that they can get to do the work of the 100?
It's like AI inception.
AI, in some ways, that's an interesting analogy, the first time I'm learning that. And we actually call it machine teaching because it is AI helping this process, because you cannot get away from it. You have to generate the data for the AI to work, but can I do it with 10 people? And I think that is going to be true. The tools are important. But the point is, once you do that, you will capitalize it many fold. So for example, let's take an education. Once you talked about it, and I associate a lot with that. You've done a lot of that work. You can use it to do better student profiling. You can scale human expertise by hopefully one teacher serving the needs of 1,000 students as opposed to just the people, because the machine is taking over some of the load. You can use it for targeted intervention. So the understanding of a student behavior and the learning prowess now opens it up to many applications. The work it required for you to build that student learner model, yes, it was a lot of hard work. They had to do quite a bit. But now there are 5 applications you can stand on it. So you'll have to take that long-term view and say the first project cost $8 million. Hey, but it's okay because I know I can do 5 applications. If you try and compute that 8 million against the benefit from the first use case, you're going to run into trouble.
So Sandeep, you had something?
I was going to say it's amazing how the cost curve of it is dropping though as well.
Yes.
Right? And I mean the things that you guys put out that enable this, the stuff that's happening from other earlier stage companies in the space, it just leads me to believe that anybody who's not willing to run that experiment and try it is going to get hit so hard.
Yes.
And because honestly, when you rack up that cost against the cost of not playing in that game,
exactly,
and the benefit that derives to the person who figures it out, it's just massive. And so suddenly you start to say, I can rent cheap computer space, I can get processing power. I need to set my objectives clearly. But once I do that, and once I get the right people kind of looking around it, and if I'm not the one doing it, somebody else is going to do it. And therefore, not playing in this game, it's like saying, that internet thing, I don't know. And, and you be the retailer who loses
what is
out
my
to
digital
everything.
strategy?
Yeah.
It's everything is digital now, right? Yeah. Anything on healthcare?
Yeah,
that's very popular, like the whole cancer example that you gave.
A couple of examples. I'll get to the cancer example. That's more publicly well understood. It's a much more of a grand challenge, hard problem. But a use case that I never imagined, but we're actually working on this is, if you've ever filled a prescription in the US, you get a box of the medicine, it actually comes out with a fairly detailed printout of side effects, what you should not do it, don't take this other medication. Because when it's
pharmacy.
At the pharmacy. Now imagine the work of the pharmacist to actually generate that. So it turns out that there is actually a huge database, and today now we and I own the database, which is why I know it was called Micromedics. It's a huge database, continuously updated, of various drugs, the right dosages, what is for adults, what is the age range, what are the interactions. It's a complex graph of relationships. Now, you put a prescription, the pharmacist fills it out. They are going to have to generate that advice for you. And today, the systems they have to do, it's very, very painful. This is a highly complex, I think the database has 50 million rows or something. And if you just use traditional querying tools, it's really, really painful. It takes a lot of time to fill out the prescription, and actually means you have to have
but
more
the data is all there.
It's all there, it's all there. So one of the systems you are working on is a very interactive way for the pharmacist to basically go chatbot, if you will. But a chatbot not to accomplish the task of generating the advisory material that is supposed to go when a prescription is handed over, when I fill your prescription. And the way the pharmacist starts is saying, okay, I'm issuing this drug. If chatbot comes and says, what's the age range? She's already looked up the database, knows what are the guiding concerns. Does this person have a weak kidney? Does this person take this other medication? It basically guides the pharmacist through the set of questions that they have to think about. The answers are all in structured form, right? It's not even it's already there in structured form. But it's so massive that it's not possible for a pharmacist to really meaningfully work.
So quick chatbot, maybe debate on that, right? And that's like playing devil's advocate to my own, to our own business, which is, why couldn't a simple website do it? So why couldn't I go to, let's say if it's a CVS, on a CVS.com as a pharmacist, enter in the file information and get that up?
No, the problem is that this is complex enough that you have to do a lot of queries to even know. So you don't know, for example, what are the 6 parameters that I have to worry about when I issue this prescription. Is age matter? Is your kidney thing matter? Does your asthma? What are those things? We now know so much information. And by God, if that interaction was called out and you didn't put it out, you can imagine the legal, the liability implications of not having called it. So the point here is, this is complex information and AI assisting an expert, in this case a pharmacist. I mean, that pharmacist knows the database better than any of us here in the room. But even they need assistance because of the complexity. And I'm sure in a lot of your industries there are many examples of even experts requiring assistance. That's a very, very common. So that's an interesting point. The other more well-publicized ones is really around, really driving very deep radiological image analysis. So one of the leading edge work we're doing is really training systems to understand electronic medical records, both in image form and in textual form, really train them for diseases like cancer. And the problem being solved there is, again, an information problem. Just like the pharmacist was overloaded with the complexity of the drug database, an average doctor is overloaded with the pace at which cancer research is going on. So when you come in and you fit a certain profile, I don't have the ability to consume all the relevant information to know that a particular experimental drug or this you should be put in this clinical trial. This is just happening too fast. So the AI is essentially assisting the doctor not in making the decision, but putting in front of the doctor for consideration the information that is likely relevant. For that, the system has to really understand that disease in a fair amount of detail, in all its modalities. Understand the research material, be able to understand clinical reports, be able to understand radiological images, EMRs, all of that. So that's the sort of the grand challenge use case, and much more mundane, but they're all AI.
Yeah, to your point, and I think obviously people who are in healthcare over here, I remember just a few months back, one of my really close friends, he's a radiologist, and he was at one of the premier radiology conferences in the States. And he came back and said that he's like, I actually went to an AI conference. I did not go to a radiology conference because there's so much work happening in the space and just trying to understand the data and then trying to make sort of inferences on that. There are a lot of people over here, Sandeep, from real world businesses, right? Not from businesses trying to be real. And I think a lot of them would love to understand some of the examples on FASOs particularly, because I'm really curious to see there's so much probably prediction going on for deliveries. I've ordered so many times from FASOs, and it's a lot about when is the rider out. There's also like an offline to online model, and maybe a little bit also about just ClearTrip, because everybody's very familiar with this sort of flight booking use case. And I've always been curious about how do they change prices the moment I'm about to book the ticket. The moment I'm about to hit pay,
And it's
sorry,
always in one direction.
It's always in one direction. It will never go down. Your flight booking has changed, you have to go back. So, yeah. So that's very hardcore AI. That's what's happening.
Yeah, it's when your business model is on thin margins, you innovate. So coming to Fasos, so Fasos basically runs what we call dark kitchens. And so the kitchens operate on the 3rd floor of some random building. And from there, we deliver food that we make. And now we deliver it across multiple brands. And so the realization over the last couple of years has been that, well, let's start with the fact that you don't go to McDonald's expecting a pizza and you don't go to Domino's expecting a burger. So now therefore, if you want multiple cuisines from a company, you're going to expect multiple brands and multiple types of interactions. Now, the cost of setting up a restaurant is immense, and the cost of setting up a location, footfalls, all of that, you don't get any real leverage on it. And you're taking massive risk each time on location and whether or not it's going to meet the demographic needs. And so what we realized we had with Fasos were these dark kitchens from which we could deliver any cuisine. So we've been running Fasos as a wraps brand, and actually when we invested about 3 years ago, we got rid of all the front-end brands, front-end footfall-driven locations, and moved them all to dark kitchens. Once we did that, we actually tried to sell biryani. And we tried to move our average order value up and said, you know what, we need to increase this, and we want to increase frequency, we want to give them breadth of offering. But Fasos was a wraps brand. And it was a wraps brand designed around a consumer who was single-serve, individual meals, and which kind of loosely translates into lonely single people, and cheap to that extent as well. So when we moved the average order value, the price up, people didn't buy. Then we launched a new brand called Beiruz Biryani. So Beiruz as a biryani brand turned out to do really well. We put a whole different story around it. We created a whole different platform for it. And what we did is we priced it differently as well. And it moved our average order value across our system up. Now, how we launched it and how we decided what to do also started to become a lesson. So we had, at that time, 140 locations. So we trialed it in 3 or 4. And then we started watching ratings of it. And we started to track the ratings. And based on ratings working or not, we figured out what needed to be tweaked and not. And so these are, again, signals coming from the entire system for us that then allowed us to then go back and say, okay, this is what we're going to change. We changed it, we ramped it up. Today, Beiruz is doing about $15 million in annualized revenue off of under $1 million in spend. It took us much more capital to get Fasos there. And it took 0 incremental CapEx. Now where we're going from there is we've launched about 6 other brands that are scaling up. We've got 20 in the pipeline. All of this riding on the same common infrastructure. So this allows us to intelligently figure out what to do. Now that became one side of how we use technology to an extent. You could argue elements of that are AI, elements are not. But where we've taken that forward with machine learning is to say, as a consumer, I know now that based on your order history, you've ordered mutton wraps, you've ordered biryani. If I'm going to launch another meat dish, you're a good candidate. You've never ordered a meat dish. I'm not going to push biryani, the mutton biryani to you. Instead, I'll perhaps promote the veg lasagna that we're launching. And so this in and of itself has increased our conversion rate on our recommendations that we give. We had about a 30% order conversion from an open rate, so now that's moved up to about 40% based on understanding this. So
that's the Amazon playbook.
That's on the Amazon, exactly.
That's probably the best, one of the best AI applications in the world. Anybody who obviously, and Flipkart has also done it now, but whenever you order on e-commerce, right, and obviously on the product page itself, people who bought this item also bought this, or these are the items recommended to you. I think that's one of the best applications of AI at scale, and that's exactly what you're referring to.
So on the consumer side, that's helped tremendously, and it's understood. On the back end, what's happening is each of our kitchens are sized based on the location and the area that we're delivering to. So therefore, how you order supplies has a big impact on how your wastage works, how your economics of the business works. So now we're using all those same techniques on the back end to start to be more intelligent about reducing, and that's the biggest measure of success there, is to say, is our wastage reducing? And our wastage compared to industry average wastage for QSRs is at half of the rate. So therefore, we know now that we're predicting correctly what people are going to order, what's then going to be used and consumed, so therefore you're not wasting. What that impacts going forward is now you can be more fresh in what you deliver. So now I no longer have to make and pre-make it. I can now make it at the end spot and deliver it more effectively.
That's such a great example that would apply to any business.
And I think the other important lesson that I take away there is often it's the front end consumer facing side that gets all of the attention.
Yeah.
But the possibilities for AI in the back end are equally
like
important,
HR.
and they apply to enterprises that may not be B2B enterprises. So you may not have a B2C. You may not have the richness of consumer data, but that doesn't mean that you should stay away from AI. Ability for AI to drive efficiencies is equally important.
We're talking about like HR applications, and somebody mentioned from HR.
Correct.
There's so much innovation happening there. IT help desks getting reinvented.
Or even 10 years, I think over 8 years back, we rolled out even within the company, in a lot of big companies, that time we call it analytics, it was really AI because you do a lot of unstructured data was used to make recommendations on everything from compensation to retention to reskilling to job placement. So if you're going to do it at scale, 5 digits, 6 digits, you need assistance to do that, and we had those kinds of numbers, 35-40% improvement in the ability to retain. And you are actually doing optimization, right? How much do I want to retain this person? And is a 20% increase sufficient to retain versus a 40% increase? And you want to get the right increase to retain relative to the value that the retention is going to. And it's very hard. You could do it by gut, but with enough data, you can actually do quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I think just this kitchen example is super amazing, right? Like manufacturing businesses or education or healthcare, it could apply to pretty much everything. But coming to what I came here for is to know how flight pricing algorithms work, and is it somebody sitting in a corner and just changing prices based on what they feel, or is there some real science behind it?
Your ticket prices are going up.
I'm glad I got my return ticket book. Yeah.
So, look, I think early on in ClearTrip's evolution, we realized that we're a distribution company. Ultimately, we don't fly the planes, we don't run the hotels, we don't do any of this stuff. So, in effect, if you're a distribution company, you have to be better at how you either acquire customers, retain customers, or manage your supply to help them get yield better. And so what that means is you have to be investing in those areas that are going to make a difference. Now, UI, user experience, all of that is, I think, to us at least, it was table stakes. You had to kind of do that well. Now, beyond that, if I can be more intelligent about knowing when, and our actual situation was, I think 30% of our customers accounted for 80% of our revenue. Now, if I don't know which 30%, I'm in trouble. And the minute you start to understand that, so you weren't in that list, sorry. So the minute you understand that, you start to differentiate. And you start to say, okay, well, I now know I need to keep them. I know if I move a person from 2 to 3, then their movement from 3 to 5 is much faster. And moving them from 2 to 3 as a purchase is really hard. And so what do I need to do at that second purchase to make that work well for us? Similarly, if I know that I can provide certain yield, if I know that a Jet Airways is running lower at this time, just based on my booking data, I can price differently for that flight, then be able to drive more volume there, improve my relationship with my supplier, which in effect will give me better terms going forward. So you end up in a virtuous cycle. So I think fundamentally, if you're in a distribution business, you end up realizing you need to solve for this much faster than if you're in a production business. If you're in a production business, you have lots of places to hide. You can change your materials, you can do this, I can pump air into potatoes, as I've heard McDonald's does. You can evolve in different ways to kind of offset your costs. But if fundamentally you're selling somebody else's product, you have to get really good at figuring out how to be more effective at looking at the information that you have so that you can dynamically price.
So is it fairly like probabilistic? Like is it basically, there's a, maybe to both of you, maybe just in general, right? When it comes to algorithms, or when it comes to just setting this up, is it fairly like, is it like a bunch of like if-then structures? Like if Jet Airways is low and the customer is among my 30%, then give him this price, and then further gets nested into the next if-then, and further gets nested. Is it just a bunch of that, or is it like, maybe now, and maybe in today's day and age with flight pricing, there's some true AI, we're just feeding in a bunch of data and the machine is understanding it?
So I'll take a very business side view to it, and I'll let you please expand upon this. But I can tell you that the traveling salesman problem is one of the most complicated problems out there, and therefore I think that there have been various companies that, if you look at the GDS is the global distribution system that actually tickets all the airline tickets outside of the low-cost carriers. So low-cost carriers came about because they basically, when they started, your Deccans, your SpiceJets, your GOs,
there was Air Costa also,
Air Costa, and the US JetBlue, Southwest. They said their fundamental, one of their biggest cost elements was distribution, and distribution was run by the GDSs, who were purporting to basically solve this issue of how do you solve which segments to book and how. But to do that, they charged a massive tax. And so basically they said, look, this system just doesn't make sense anymore. We're not going to keep running that. But fundamentally, it's a very complicated system. So the short answer is yes, it's definitely hard, and there's multivariates that are involved in it. To be straight about how we did at ClearTrip, it was very basic to do. Today it's become much more complicated.
Sure.
Today it's multivariate. I'd imagine that if you would look at these problems, you'd say that there are many ways you can map this, from time of day to hour to frequency of purchase to other purchases to other apps on your phone to a variety of things. I wouldn't say we're that deep into it all yet. The objective would be to go there and to learn customers better.
In general, to answer that question, I think AI systems tend to go through a journey. There's two ways. You asked whether they are a bunch of rules. In some cases, they start out that way, but then the AI systems let you tweak it. So a domain expert starts with a set of rules, but the AI system says, look, I'm going to try it out, but since I know how well something is working, I'm going to tweak. I'm going to decide that it's not 20%, I'm going to adjust it because I have enough data to them.
So that basically
so
given
it's still if then else, but the system is tweaking.
And let's say the trainer has given the freedom to the system to decide.
But you have to set it up. That's one. The second is where some of the modern AI systems are doing is, don't set it up. If you are able to set it up in an environment where you're able to say, here is the input, here is my recommended output, just go learn. In some cases, you can set it up. And we are seeing it in domains where you would never imagine. We've recently done work. Credit card fraud has probably been around for 40 years, as long as credit cards. Some of the new AI techniques are giving 25% improvement in something that you would think has been beaten to death. Started off as a body of rules, continues to remain a body of rules, but these systems are coming in and saying, and the reason they are doing is now you have 40 years worth of data to work on. Until you spend 40 years, you don't have 40 years worth of data. Suddenly you have 40 years worth of data and you can deploy them. Yeah. So I think they can start as rules get tweaked. They can start as black bodies, the system learns the rules. It's all of these techniques exist. But I think one of the interesting things in all of these examples that I see is that it is for companies, one of the hardest journeys is where to start.
Yeah.
Where to start is often, and I don't think there is a thumb rule, but at least with, and maybe I since I have you are a consumer expert, let me maybe couch my advice to the more B2B type of company. Start with looking at your business processes. Don't think at a use case level. Think of across your businesses. What is that business problem where you believe you are most underutilizing your data in terms of helping you make this business easy? Start there. Because then at the very least you can say, look, what I'm trying to do is introduce AI not for one use case, but I'm going to look at where all I can use AI in a certain business process. Then you get comfortable. You can decide, okay, my HR is a mess, my financial operations is a mess, my something else is a mess. But maybe I'm a manufacturing company, I've done a lot of investment in instrumentation. Maybe applying AI using IoT data in scheduling is the place to start. Start there. But start at a business process level and take a look at a business process. At least in our experience, that has been a much crisper way. Everybody talks about crawl, walk, run. Often the question is, how much should I crawl? And I think the unit of crawling, at least in my opinion, that's been useful, is a business process. That also means allows you, there is an operational reason to think that way, because then there's also a cultural element to your organization. Getting AI into your organization is not just about the technology, it's cultural. So you can also look at which part of your organization is most nimble, that has the right leaders, which has the culture to embrace new technology. You can factor that in. And chances are pick a business process in that part of your organization which is most amenable to adopt new technology. So you can bring all these other considerations in practice.
Are we doing on time? 5 minutes left? Okay, great. So there's 2-3 very important burning questions I have that we want to cover. So we were discussing outside a little bit about this, and I guess as CEOs and leaders of businesses and there's human resources and all types of functions, my favorite topic, talent and hiring the right set of people to do this. First I want to set the context in terms of who, let's say, would be somebody who might be able to help you track the path of, let's say, building a great AI system. Right? This is probably a machine learning engineer, data scientist, maybe somebody who's starting out a data analytics and wants to get into building algorithms. I think broadly somebody who can interpret data, create some algorithm around it, and get, let's say, a machine to start working on it. Sriram, you had a very interesting perspective. So when we're talking about hiring, we're talking about, let's say, a talent. We're basically saying that, okay, listen, within India specifically in our context, right, are there people available, companies available that, let's say, we can engage with or hire that will help us solve those problems, right? I think that's a larger problem for most enterprises. Great, I want to do this. Now, who do I go to, right? Do I go to my web developer, right? Probably not. Do I go to my special projects person? Like, where do we even start? And then where do we build that expertise? We've definitely, as a startup, and then having gone through the stages, struggled with that. We still continue to struggle with that because we feel that the right set of people to build some of those pieces out are either hard to get, or maybe the bar is high, or combination of reasons not working out. I know you had an interesting perspective, so definitely want to hear, and then somebody definitely from the company that you work with.
Yeah, so, and I don't know if your question is specific to IMSP is in India.
India, yeah, definitely.
Specific question, right? Definitely, I think at scale there is a shortage, definitely. And my perspective was, as running a research lab, my scale is small, and I can afford for my bar to buy. At that scale, getting premium talent has actually not been a challenge for me. And I've seen it because we do hiring in the US, I do hiring in Singapore. Getting very, very top quality AI talent at the hiring needs of a research institution has not been a challenge.
And just, more sort of tangible question, which as a CEO, and I know everybody will want to know, that when you say top quality talent, is compensation sort of in dollar terms similar to the US? Like that's what I'm looking to pay out.
So I think there are two things people are looking for, especially AI talent. They're looking for, obviously, compensation, but they're also looking for experience because they know that they are at the cusp. So if they believe that, and maybe that's a luxury I have, that working with me, they are going to be at the bleeding edge of how this technology evolves, and they're happy to be there for the next 3-4 years to come. So
that's easy for IBM. So how does the enterprise do?
So that's where I think the trick to get AI right is to really think of a multi-dimensional. At least and if I look at successful AI projects within an enterprise we've been engaged in, there has been a combination of significant domain expertise, which is why I go back to picking the business process. It is not done in isolation. You do need, if it's HR, you need your HR folks invested in it. Only they know where the data lives. Only they know what you can't do that. If you are a fresh company in the consumer-facing world, mostly you are putting up a platform, the consumers generate the data, and then you are applying the AI to drive efficiency and so on.
Yeah.
But in many of the traditional enterprises, you need a combination of the domain expertise. Then you have to go look at a technology provider, in-house, external. I don't think there have been ever golden answers. But one statistic that I have seen, one common pattern that I have seen is for organizations to really separate out. You call it a digital lab, innovation lab. That really works because what often happens is the conversation between an external, let's say your AI solution provider, and your internal business, is a huge influence mismatch. The guy who's coming in talking machine learning, deep learning, the latest what, and you're saying, well, what are you talking about? So having a part of your organization that can serve as the go-between the external AI expertise really works. If you're serious about AI, I would say go look for, a leader, not in your organization, outside, who can underpin the strategy. Have a small team, a digital team around them. And then they go decide, they look at your organization, help you figure out which business process is the best target, and then they go look at whether to recruit in-house or to contract.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So I think we do, at least on the enterprise side, now we do work with about 50 large enterprises in India, and I think almost 90% would have what you're calling an innovations team, a lab.
And they're very useful.
Yeah, I think they act as the first filter to kind of understand. So yeah, I echo that sentiment completely as you're thinking about it. Kind of separating that out creates a different culture. So for example, one of the largest banks in India, pretty much like the second or third largest private bank in India, they had a hackathon. That's crazy, right? A bank having a hackathon, and we were invited to kind of go teach people and mentor them about AI and bots. And there were actually bank managers over there, building out bot solutions. It was so heartening to see, but it was all created by the innovations team.
Correct.
So I think definitely, completely see that. Sandeep, I know one of the things about Lightbox as a fund specifically, from Prashant, something that I know is that theirs is a fund that not only obviously provides capital, but just for everybody's reference, is fairly operationally also available. And that's actually one of the bigger sort of differentiators that you bring as a fund. So as a result, I'm guessing you see a lot of personal sort of on-the-ground hiring experiences. And I can imagine obviously a lot of C-level senior talent, but also sort of deep tech, what we're talking about. Would love to hear across the entire spectrum, how are you seeing things? How much do you think is actually available versus how much is it, let's say, reserved for guys like IBM, Wipros, and the others?
Yeah. I would say probably maybe 10 years ago, design thinking as a concept started to come about. And this whole idea, you must be more cognizant of design. Apple led that in a big way with the importance of user experience and design and what effect it can have. IKEA and furniture has done a great job with that. And so then the conversation used to be, okay, how do we create design thinking in the companies? How do we make design happen? And I think that what I'm seeing happen in general overall is that the cost of learning stuff is dropping significantly. And so now, as a leader of a company, it's one thing to change your URL to .ai and say that, but the fact that you understand what this means, you've taken the time, as much as you'll say you're the business side of the equation, you can go a level into it. You can have a conversation to say, okay, this is what's going on, this is why it's relevant. You mapped out the processes to understand what it is. That, I think, has a huge effect on your ability to attract talent. And what I mean by that, it's to one extent, it's great to say, okay, look, we have the team over here that's going to transition everybody and bring them in. But as a leader of the company, the companies that I've seen be able to hire the people effectively are the ones where the CEOs have truly imbibed it, and Imbibe is actually a case in point of that in our portfolio, the education company, where the CEO, Aditi, is just so deep into it. I mean, you can go into whatever level of conversation with her about this, and she's not a techie. But she's just decided it's critical for her business to understand this. I think that AI is a fancy word for basically every aspect of what's going to change your business. And therefore, when you decide that this is important in your company, I think it starts from the top saying that, okay, we're going to learn this at whatever level to make it be very clearly understood that this is not to tick the box on a shareholder report to say that we do AI. This is to say that I am changing the very way in which we're thinking about our business. And then I think talent comes. And then I think you have a shot in the game. Then it becomes a question of what's the work you're giving them, who are the people they're going to interact with. Then I would think you spend a lot of time with them and say, how do we get the people that you're around to kind of think about our businesses to kind of help with this and get companies that are moving in that direction. And you come to events like this, and the fact that you're here becomes a big part of how your company's perceived in what is otherwise potentially a very slow-moving industry, let's say, or not as progressive an industry, as a leader in it, and then suddenly people are willing to migrate towards it.
No, that's a great point.
One comment I want to make on the skill talent, I think there is a paucity, but if you sort of look at globally what's happening, the AI is truly definitely the new ID. And the one data point that I love about this is about 15 years back, Intro to Programming was a course that people took independent of the degree. It wasn't just the computer science graduates that took that. Everybody said, okay, I better know a little bit of programming. And I know a lot of my friends, independent of their discipline, try to. And so the introduction to programming used to be like the most subscribed course in most top universities.
I took it too, yeah.
Yeah, guess what that is right now? It is some of either AI or machine learning.
Okay,
is what it is. So, and today, to the point about cost of learning, I think in 2017, and I know the two numbers, but I think it's true across the board, the number of subscriptions to the Stanford undergraduate first AI course was in the 4 digits for the first time ever. 1,025 people subscribed on the first day.
On a class of 3,000 students. Probably, right?
Probably,
Yeah,
whatever
3,000
undergraduate.
students,
Same with MIT. It's happening in every one of the top universities. So yes, I think we currently have a shortage, but I think the world has gotten it. Now, will we get top quality out of every one of them? No. But it is clear that AI is being perceived as the new IT, at least from the very narrow view of, hey, what should I do to get a good job? Okay, I better know a little bit of AI. There's good and bad out of that, but that's happening.
Yeah, and again, I know there's a lot of CEOs in the room, and I obviously care a lot about these things. Is it, would you say that it is outside of, let's say, the C-level management, the most expensive talent that you foresee having in the company, like a top quality data scientist? We think so, like at least that's happening in our company.
Look, I think the group that's in charge of product. So it used to be in the FMCG world that the marketing guy was the one.
Exactly.
Then it moved to the product person to really understood the intersection of the market requirements and what technology could deliver. I think that, yeah, very much so, this mix of an understanding of business requirements with an ability to leverage data to deliver those, I think is going to be.
I think the mix is key. I think, careers where you're able to reach some deep domain expertise, could be vertical, but combine that with expertise, and you don't have to go down in the weeds to understand every bit of the technology, but I think, as he gave the example of the CEO, the ability to get to a few levels deeper, I think that mix is going to be invaluable.
I think you look at it today, Udacity, any of these online courses, Khan Academy, I mean, you can get it. I mean, you just sit there, you spend a couple of hours. I think it's well worth the investment by as many people as you can expose to it to say, all right, this is what we're faced with. Now, let's decide what to do with it.
Yeah. The reason I was asking this question was that specifically a little bit of the comp was, or where they fall in the stack is that, particularly for enterprises and for a lot of us, Thanda CEOs that may be out here or anywhere else, it gets very uncomfortable to think that, my leading sales guy gets X, but a data scientist is going to get 3X, right? Because it's hard to see that value, and particularly if a leading sales guy has 25 years experience, and your data scientist is 5 years, out of
25 years old.
25 years, yeah, or maybe 16 sometimes, right? Or maybe 25 years old, and how do you justify that, right? And that's why I was kind of stressing upon that a little bit, because trust me, even as an AI first company, it took me a while to kind of understand that, because my co-founder, who's the CTO, really made sure that we got that culture. But I can imagine that can be hard for a lot of other companies as well. Great. I think that's 45 minutes gone. We didn't really realize where at least for us, where that went. Maybe the wine was helping. But anyway, we have 15 minutes for Q&A. So just shoot at it. I think I can hear everybody loud and clear. In case I cannot, there's mics roaming around. There's mics. Okay, we have a mic over there. Great. Got the first one over there.
So I have a question. You speak about software programming and analytics. When does the line, or what are the elements that cross the line to making it sound or making it become AI? Or is it just M2M being now called IoT?
So it's a good question, and I think it is a continuum. There is no line. I think there are two characteristics that at least I would use. I think it goes back to maybe my first answer to your question, which is if there is a significant amount of data being used in the analytics, which was not geared for machine consumption, it was primarily for human, but you're still able to tap into it, I would say AI is important. So your final model may be a classical data analytics model. I'll give you the following example to concretize that. We've been doing predictive analytics for machine maintenance for many years. Right? You start with whatever data you have. Now I would say that's data analytics, and we've been doing that before AI. You could have an AI version of it where it says, I'm not only going to take sensor, pressure, temperature data, I'm also going to take in all the unstructured maintenance reports, including the comments written by a technician, saying, this was gray in color, I heard a noise, and I replace this part. You take all that and now build a predictive model. But I would say AI is involved because that maintenance report was always authored for another human being to look at it. Now you're getting the machine to look at it and make a predictive. I think you've crossed the chasm from pure data analytics to that. That's one example.
So would that be basically the machine does something for the first time that it hasn't done before, based on what it's done in the past?
No, I think it's the machine. The output is still the same. It's a better predictive model for you to realize whatever you need to do, either replace or repair. But the accuracy has gone up now because you are tapping into another data source that you were ignoring so far in building your predictive model. So that's one example of crossing the chasm. The other example where you often cross the line is applying it in a scenario where you thought this is absolutely a human's decision. And now you are providing assistance in decision making. And that's where a lot of the examples around whether it is education or healthcare fall, which is expertise, right? Expertise is always hard to get. And if you want to scale that expertise, then you need something that can consume information and distill it for that expert. That would be an example. And I don't think is analytics that is truly AI. So these are the two examples I can think of.
Sorry, so what was the name? Every question we just.
My name is Angira.
Sorry, what company?
Vodafone.
Okay.
So conceptually,
So name and company.
Okay, my name is Sanjay Banerjee. I work for an executive search firm called Amram. So two things. First is conceptually, what you are then saying is, in order for it to be classified as AI, is to look at historically what we would do is we would look at an input, an algorithm, and then an output. So what we are then trying to do is getting an input, maybe getting some output as training data, and devising the algorithm. Is that what AI is?
In some cases you are, where you are basically saying, I have examples of input output from what a human being is today. So the example could be, I have all these images and here is the diagnosis from the radiology. I have this. I'm going to train a machine to do that. In some respects, the machine figures out how to do what the radiologist does. So that's one class of AI. But in that other example that I gave, that's not the example. There, all I was doing was, it was still input, predictive model, output. I was expanding my input. If you were only using sensor readings, now I'm going to throw in 3 more data sources that you could not use without AI. By now using that, your model gives better answers. Better quality, better risk prediction, better risk of default. It's happening in financial services too. More and more, when you're looking at financial inclusion type examples, you don't have the same amount of structured data to make a credit decision that you would have about us. We are all very digital. We have our ID returns, we have our corporate balance sheet, and robust models can be good. How do you do risk judgment of somebody who has very little digital footprint? Then you have to depend on unstructured data sources. That's another example where the problem remains the same, the model remains the same, you're expanding the input. So that would also be there.
Question of that.
I'm Naveen Kapoor. I'm from Comparex. I'm a question for Sandeep. I think so. When you look at artificial, it's easy to start, but where do you end? Because as you keep on searching, go deeper and deeper, at some point in time you will enter the privacy of the consumer. Today we have the Facebook diaspora. So, is there a point where they say, okay, stop? I hope Sandeep you're understanding what I'm saying.
So there's a great book, Homo Deus, which is about the future of humankind. And Yuval Harari wrote, his first book was Sapiens, which is a history of mankind. And Homo Deus, basically the conjecture is, as mankind, we're left with 3 main problems in life, which is 1, how do we solve for immortality? How do we find happiness? And what do we do about the singularity that's going to emerge, which is the convergence of machine and man? So if you take that view, it's almost inevitable. And I mean, I think that is actually the debate of the world right now, which is, where is the ethical line? Where is the moral line? As we were getting ready for this, I was just remembering Terminator, which was in 1984, and the whole premise, the start of the whole thing was a machine that was kind of created to help make life better.
So 34 years, it feels like,
Yeah. So if you go back and you look at this, I mean, I mean, actually, to go back even further, the whole idea of AI started in 1955, and that was when it first was coined, right? So you go back, and so, I mean, like, as an investor in the space, I would say we would hope that we would be led by our moral consciousness in the direction of, make sure that we're not abusing the information that you're getting rights to. But I mean, again, if you take the theme of that book and you take the world in general, you're rewarded more and more so by the amount that you contribute to the digital pipe. And so whether it's the pictures you put on Instagram, the posts you put on Facebook, the tweets you tweet out there, individually you're recognized more and more for the followers and likes and things that you contribute. And therefore, your value increases based on what you contribute. So therefore, the system rewards you for that. The system gets more about you, then therefore you can use that more, and therefore you can influence an election, any sort of a situation. It's a tough one. I don't know that I have an answer per se. I would say that it's going to keep evolving, and that is actually one of the topics worth figuring it out as this moves forward. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, related thing in popular culture is there's a show on Netflix called Black Mirror. So I enjoy watching it, but my wife couldn't go past 6 episodes because it was just too much, along those lines, right? It just freaked you out beyond a point. The social media example was part one.
That was the episode.
That was the
Without
episode.
the consumer, I think even outside the consumer space, I think we are already hitting ethical bias security issues with AI, and that goes beyond the consumer space, because if you're going to deploy AI in decision making, and you are subject to the laws of the land when it comes to, and the regulations come to decision making, you have to continue to follow the laws of the land and regulations. Just because you replaced in your company a human with a machine or a human with a human plus machine, that doesn't go away. And today a lot of work is actually going on. Technical work is going on to empower you to make sure that the AI systems can also be governed well. Today we are very early in the governance of AI systems.
But you see, that works as long as we're governing the AI system.
I understand.
The minute the AI system is deciding its own rules, then we have
That's where where do you draw the line?
And so,
all I was trying to point out is that even before you get to that line, even in the more mundane use cases, you have certain lines to watch for. If you're going to get an AI system to make a credit decision, how do you ensure that it is not racially or gender biased? Today, for example, there is nothing in your software engineering. Today, you must have a quality process when you put a piece of software up. You test for quality, you test for security, and your IT shop knows how to do that. Or if you contract it out, your contracted IT shop knows how to do that. Do IT shops know what is the next set of 5 things they have to do before they deploy an AI system? Not really. But that's starting to get defined, and so we're going to see. So that's even more basic before you get to sort of the more extreme scenario.
I have one different question from a social point of view. Don't you think artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to make our children stop thinking the way the brains used to think? Because everything is at a click of a button, and they are not being innovative to think more.
Yeah, like how, they're never going to go out on the street and call for a cab. It will all be on a button. Exactly, right? I mean, how are they going to learn to call cabs? No.
I mean, look, I would start by saying every form of technology has always had that risk to it. So we talk about self-driving cars today, barring the incident in Arizona recently. I mean, the argument used to be that you needed a lift operator, because how could the lift run by itself? I don't think any of us had a lift operator here, and so I think we're quite comfortable with that. Actually, you would argue that a fair amount of the things that machines will do, even to the point of medical examinations, the information that a machine-based doctor will have will be so much better than the information that a doctor will have. The lack of stress that that machine will incur is much less than the stress that a physical doctor will incur. So, sure, absolutely. I think the nature of jobs are going to change. I think the very quantity of jobs available will probably shift, and that is a concern. But I don't think it's something that can be fought. I mean, I think actually, I would say one of the things I would love to see happen in India more is greater investment into this, because without it, we will lose the supposed advantage that we have today because of massive numbers of people. To tomorrow that will go away, and then therefore, if we've not invested aggressively enough in this, you will basically be competed out. And so, yeah, our kids are going to have to learn a different way of thinking. And
with technology, so to Sandeep's point, there's obviously the classic question that people ask all the time, and I'm guessing you guys ask this quite a bit, is that, is AI going to eliminate jobs, right? Is AI going to get to a point where people are not going to have jobs anymore because machines are going to take over? But if you look at it like over, let's say, going back to some of the books that Sandeep mentioned, Sapiens, Amadeus, and some of the others, and just sort of how the world evolved, technology has always improved lives and created jobs historically. Right? It's always been for the better. It's the same example as saying, ATMs are launching, why are you going to go to the bank? Right? Every single bank teller is going to lose their job, but that didn't happen, right? Bank tellers got upskilled to actually doing more complicated tasks, which they didn't do before. So it's lift operator, bank ATM, all are very similar examples so to answer your question specifically, I think what's going to happen is that our kids will end up having more time to do smarter things. Right? Today, maybe we invested so much time while growing up trying to run around, find a bus, find a cab. Now it's available at the tap of a button. That gives me time to do something more, which hopefully is smarter and improves life and takes the world forward.
I think the only difference, I guess, is the pace. I think it's been true that technology has always destroyed a jobs and created a few jobs. I think one of the things that if you had a sort of 100 years to sort of live through the transformation, you could do the appropriate skill change. Right now, I think the pace is at a, so sometimes your social change or the skilling change or the educational change is not happening at the pace at which this is happening. So the Industrial Revolution, gave you about 100 years to go from, a skill to another skill. I think you're getting like 10 years and you're outdated in 5 years.
But also you have technology that enables you to go faster.
True. But that means that you are going to start to select people. I think the most important skill, to go back to your definition of smartness, is going to be adaptability and flexibility more than anything else. I think certain fundamental definitions of smartness are going to remain true. But if I was to use a hiring metric today beyond sort of base, that's what I do. Because I'm convinced that if I gave you my one chart summary of my project portfolio today, and you invite me a year from now, I give a one chart summary, there will be 30, 40% will be different. So what's the point hiring somebody for that chart that I have today? Because 1 year for that skill is irrelevant. So I really need a fundamentally smart person. They have to know AI or blockchain or whatever, but they have to be adaptable. So to me, that's the biggest.
What's interesting that I was at another conference once and someone made a comment that said that if you brought a doctor back from 100 years ago and put him in a hospital today, they'd be lost. Technology has advanced so much. You bring a teacher back from 100 years ago and put him in a school, it's the same. And I think that that's kind of telling about the challenge that the next generation has is, and we're mired in a system that is driven off of succeeding in a historical way. And so standardized exams, you must go 4 years of college education, probably irrelevant.
And it's stayed the same for a long time.
But now, do you want to be the parent that tells your kid that, okay, let's don't go to college? And how's that going to play out? And so, it's a self-reinforcing system until the whole system breaks. And I think that you're absolutely right, this flexibility and adaptability. But now, if you say, don't worry about that physics exam, don't worry about that chemistry exam.
So I'm Rahul Agrawala. I'm a serial entrepreneur and I also do some amount of investment and I've invested in a couple of AI companies. So going back to a point Sandeep made about India and the competitive edge issue. So data is, of course, in the US, most of the innovation today has been happening in the US. But China, given the data advantage, has some advantages there, especially coming to AI. So just a thought process on US, China, India, and how AI is going to play out and what we should be looking at doing in India.
So as a venture capitalist, I raise my money from outside of India. So I start usually our presentation by saying, India is not China and India is not the US. And it seems self-evident, yet nonetheless, it seems like people have invested heavily assuming that what's worked in those model markets is going to work in India and just copy it, move it over, and it'll be fine. And the reality is it just doesn't, and it doesn't function that way. Now that being said, we have very many unique elements to our market. And I think that if we can instead for a second reflect on what those unique attributes are and figure out how those work to our advantage, to figure out how then, whether it's AI, whether it's design, whether it's any aspect of how you're going to go about addressing a consumer market can work, then I think we can actually have an advantage. So to give you a direct example, that whole story I gave you about Fasos and the business and how we built it, there have been multiple businesses going after food delivery in the US. And if you take the analogy for what those companies are doing, it would have been to say if Amazon woke up and said, the way I'm going to disrupt retail is by going and picking up product from Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Borders and delivering it to your house, that's a fair amount of what's been going on in food delivery in many markets. And that's because those markets are well penetrated with massive scale brands on the QSR side. So you have Chipotle, McDonald's, Yum Brands, you have a variety of them across the board. India is highly underpenetrated. We're fragmented, unbranded. The two largest fast food brands in the country are McDonald's and Domino's. Pizza and burgers in a country in India. Makes no sense. Yet that's the dynamic that exists here. So in that structure, and in a structure where our cost base for delivery is really low, we have an advantage to actually launch a business in the QSR space that's really disrupting. The largest retail company is Amazon, the largest delivery company is Uber, the largest entertainment company is now Netflix, the largest hospitality company is Airbnb, the largest QSR company is still McDonald's globally. That hasn't changed because the elements of what can change actually exist best in India. So to the point, I think that sure, we can measure ourselves on AI progress on the same metrics that you look at in the US and China, and we'll probably fail. But if you look at the needs of the market here, you look at the issues that exist here, you look at the advantages that can arise from the challenges that we have, and then apply, whether it's technology in some way, I think we can build phenomenal businesses.
So quick question, and I think we brought up China, and specifically because we're talking about AI and data, and this applies to both of you, because I know Sriram, you were talking about some of the work that you do in the region. Do you think the Great Wall has an advantage? And by Great Wall, I'm saying the Great Wall of data, the fact that there's no outside companies that can go into China, and the fact that China is directly not go outside. There's obviously, if there were 5 VCs sitting in the room, that would be a very fun conversation to have about capital and how internet companies are disrupted. But just, do you think that purely down to the data aspect, and because of the Great Wall that surrounds the country, there's an advantage?
So again, there are obviously intrinsic advantages to be a protected economy, and I think that that's given, whether it's Tencent, Alibaba, tremendous advantage to grow to a certain scale, independent of competition. I think though that now in India, when you take the situation, we have 2 challenges. One is, there was an expectation that India was the next China. The reality is, China grew both from a technology standpoint as well as from a per capita income standpoint. So in the 10-year period that China's technology penetrated, they also grew per capita income because the manufacturing jobs were growing there. That meant more consumption there. That meant that you had access to whatever it may be, but data is definitely one of those. Now in India, the problem is the 10-year period during which we grew per capita income, we grew technology penetration, we didn't grow average per capita income. Actually what happened is the top end grew much more than the rest of it, and so your rich got richer and the gap grew wider. Now, what that means though is that you still have a reasonable base, because numbers work in our favor, that at that top end you still have a large number of people consuming a reasonable amount. But you have nowhere near the same level of data or consumption taking place as you do in China. So now, therefore, the comparison is unfair to begin with. As far as we look at it, the economy that I think is relevant from a consumption standpoint is about the size of what Germany is today, in terms of 5-6 years. So in terms of consumption capacity, it's about 1.6 trillion by 2025. And so, people, 180 million in the next 5-6 years. So given that we're not even in the same zip code in terms of data that will be generated, but I still maintain that it's interesting enough because the other balance of the population still needs goods, services, products, and we still do need to find a way to improve their per capita income. So the farmer issue, the dynamics of the way it works in India is you're not able to aggregate farming land. But that doesn't mean that that technology shouldn't penetrate there, and we should almost done an amazing job of figuring out how to do that in a very different structure. Now, can you bring that same efficiency to cooperative societies or producer networks the way it's happened? Perhaps. Maybe technology plays a role there. Maybe that will generate a data stream that will compete on the levels of Monsanto or whoever else, the Cargill or whoever else you may want to. So we have challenges. I don't have answers for sure, but I think given these challenges, there's massive opportunity. And I think that's what makes the opportunity that much more interesting right here.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great one. I think, by the way. I think is in some of these spaces, technologies like AI will let you, for example, leverage remote sensing and satellite data to get the type of insights that you previously thought you need on-ground instrumentation to do. And the challenge you have with on-ground instrumentation is you look at the digitization of agriculture in a mature economy. It happened through large aggregation, then the ability to invest in capital with smart sensors on the ground or tractors fitted with sensors and so on. I don't think the same solution will work in India because you're not going to have the same aggregation. But now you have IoT in the sky. The amount of satellite data available, and now you can use AI to get the same level of insights that you previously thought you needed sensors. So I think agriculture is a great example. I think you will see a lot of innovation in the application of technology for the 1.2 billion minus the 180 billion. And there is a market there. I don't think we talk about that market much. I don't think we've seen enough companies in that market, but I think there is an opportunity that I think we will all learn along what those. So you have a question, sir?
I'm Pawan Chaudhary from Bygone. I would like to ask you, when the automobile came as a challenge to the buggy industry, there was, as you said rightly, a lot of anxiety that jobs will be lost. But automobile industry gave more jobs than it took away from the buggy industry. This time, however, don't you think the situation is a little different? Because earlier it was the horse, this time the animal which is going to be replaced is the man. So the man has been doing that work, human beings have been doing that work, and the replacement is coming from AI. So do you not feel that this will severely or substantially further load the unemployment burden of the society? And if you think that it is going to do that, what is the solution which AI might spring itself to take care of this problem?
So I'll actually take that. Funnily enough, I answered this question just 2 days back. To a journalist because that's their favorite question, right? Whenever they're talking about how we're taking away jobs, at least I can tell you that in my limited capacity, there's only up to a certain number of years that I can predict what will happen, right? I don't know that, let's say, how many people at Ford or Henry Ford could say that, you know what, at some point there'll be cars available at the top of a button 100 years back. So maybe I cannot say maybe what will happen in 100 years, but I think broadly, for me, here's where the next few decades looks like when I look at the space, right? I think the next 10 years, to Sriram's earlier point, we're just so early that there's going to be zero impact. Case in point, just today, I got to Delhi a lot earlier. I met the CEO of the 4th largest BPO in the world, year over year. And their business has grown last year more than what they grew any year before, right? Because of the same aspect that they are getting into so many new spaces that today he's like, what are you talking about AI to me? Like, I have a 10-year roadmap which is still showing growth, right? So I think the next decade or so, 10 to 15 years, is still going to be, to his point, we're still early, understanding processes, understanding applications. We're going to have 100 more of sessions like these, where we'll all get together, think about some problems. And then I think towards the end of the next decade or towards sort of early 2030s and so on, you'll get to a point where now AI will become really real as part of impacting process. At that point, according to me, what may happen for the next decade is this new set of jobs will be created, right? Where there's going to be a lot of people doing tagging, training data. We ourselves have about 40 people in our office who just tag data, right? Because it's so important, that exercise is so important. AI trainer job will become quite popular. That will probably go for a couple of decades. And then beyond that, my imagination is...
By the way, there are, to your BPA point, there are already people who are in that business. They've already made the challenge to be in the data annotation business because they know that is central to AI. So, and to your buggy example, I think it's also important to understand that to even there was a human replacement of job, because if it took you, 20 horses and 10 horsemen to transport 100 people, one locomotive with one engine driver could transport. So even there was not just a horse, there was a drop. It is just that it's very, very hard to predict what these new jobs are. But new jobs...
Yeah, I think the reason people worry about this a little bit more is because it's the real imagination of a person being replaced with a robot. Right?
Yeah.
It's that Terminator.
Unfortunately, and it goes back to my point, we always worry about the interaction.
What if the ATM was made like a person?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the mental
same
image.
thing. Like, imagine you went to an ATM tomorrow who looked like a person, was a robot. Instead of putting a card inside something, you put a card inside his mouth and money came out. You'd probably be worried, oh God, they've actually put robots over here. Actually, it's the same thing. Right? It's fundamentally the same thing. It's just the way you package it.
But also, I think that it's a broader social trend that's taking place outside of AI even. If you look at companies are getting bigger, consolidation is happening, as a result efficiencies are growing. And so we can point to AI as the cause, or you can point to scaling as the cause. I mean, everyone's searching for efficiency somewhere. And so in the endless pursuit of growth and profit, as a result, this is just one of the steps along the way. Now, sure, it's a more tangible step, but we could argue, should profits be the metric of measure for businesses? Should growth be the metric of measure? If you start to question a lot of these things, then those probably have a bigger contributory effect to some of the decline in jobs as well. So.
It's interesting that humans are synonymous with inefficiency, right? So efficiency has always been about taking humans away and replacing with automation, right?
We've been doing it for 100 years.
Yes.
Anyway, so I think we're out of time, but just one final thought or question. The real impact of AI. So I grew up. I'm a 80s, 90s kid. So the hair looks like I'm not older, but I'm actually an 80s, 90s kid. So I grew up with this Terminator, like watched it 100 times probably by the time I was 18. Grew up with the whole idea of flying cars. Grew up with the whole idea that by the time I'm like in my 30s, like robots will be roaming around serving me alcohol, right? That's not happened. Right, and that's actually not the way it's played out. You still don't have, has my life fundamentally advanced immensely because of technology? Like, am I in flying cars? Am I with robots around me? That's not happened. And I try and think about it sometimes. Is that because of moral issues? Is that because we're scared? As let's say. A generation? Is that because technology? I don't think it's so much of technology. I think technology, if somebody really gave their heart and mind, could be solved. Just wanted to get you guys' thoughts a little bit as a parting thought that, for me at least, as my childhood imagination, AI is actually that. Right? AI is actually achieving at some point those massive impacts. And, one of the guys who, let's say, I follow and read a little bit about is Peter Thiel, right? He talks a lot about that we have done nothing in technology in 50 years, right? We are still using computers and internet, right? What's going on, right? So just some thoughts, like, and we can discuss over drinks maybe. What do you guys make of it? Why has that not happened as fast as what we had thought when we were growing up, and what is preventing it?
So, interesting question. I think, despite everything we have talked about, we're still using the principles and the fundamentals of computing as they were invented in the 1950s. So, in some respects, I think we are still limited by what digital computers can do. You can have 1 million servers in the cloud, but they're still all digital computers. I think for that type of dramatic amplification, you're going to have to see what happens with things like quantum, because you truly have to be able to say there is a class of problems that we don't even know we can solve, and then I think you're going to see. I'll give you one data point just to blow your mind. To simulate, and this is to simulate fully one non-trivial atom, and I'm not talking about a pharma drug, right? Complex molecule. One, I think they call it a molecule with like 2 atoms. So think of your little chemistry class with 2 little atoms with them. To fully simulate in its entirety everything that's happening inside it, beyond I think 2 atoms or something like that, to fully simulate, you have to build a digital computer that is 1/4 the size of this planet. So that's how limited we are in something like that. Now quantum has the potential to dramatically change that. Now imagine the implications to materials, to pharma, to drug. I think we've not seen anything like that. So to your point of why this still looks like how the Space Odyssey or Terminator, depending on whichever decade you're born in, because we are still limited by the imagination of what we think digital computers can do. Quantum is truly a leap. And it has been hypothesized for 60 years, and we're now, starting to have, you can now touch and feel quantum computers if you want to, use R, use Google, there's lots of work done. We see a breakthrough. If you see a 50-qubit quantum computer actually working, you're going to be blown away by its implications on chemistry, blown away by its implications on risk modeling. That would be transformative. So that's my perspective. It's nothing to do with AI. I think that the computing paradigm itself has to change for that.
That's awesome. So I'm
the non-technical version.
I'm very happy that none of that has happened yet, because that means the opportunity exists for us to invest in it. So I think, and I think it is very true that we continuously imagine where it's going to go, and it takes time for us to get there. And I think that understanding of what goal we're setting and what we want to get to and why we want to get there is sort of a light of an idea of where we can deploy our energy and time. And whether it's quantum that delivers it or something else, I don't know. But I think the point that we still have an imagination of what the world can be, and it hasn't been attained, is what makes it very optimistic and exciting to wake up every day and go about this.
Yeah. On that note, this was fun. This was informative.
Like flying cars where ticket prices drop to go on them. Flying cars with dropping ticket prices.
They'll be as cheap as, or somewhere in the range of being affordable.
There's no money required in your world, right?
That's true. Only crypto. Only virtual currency that we trade in. Yeah. So in my world, there's no money here. But yeah, we'll all be here. I think some more time for drinks and dinner. So I would love to obviously catch up and discuss further some of the topics that we couldn't cover. But yeah, hope this was fun. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists and guests, for your participation. It was indeed a highly thought-provoking discussion. And by joining us today, you've helped us lay the second brick of the Blue Circle. We have heard the first few notes of our song. We promise that we will create a symphony in all-round leadership care. If you like the music we create, please do hum along so the voice goes far. Thank you very much for coming. Please feel reach out to me for further information. Also, would request you to please join us for cocktail and dinner afterwards. Thank you very much. Thank you.